This episode is brought to you by Guthrie Rocha Properties, a real estate agent that's all about exceeding expectations. Now, I've personally used Guthrie Rocha to buy and sell several properties here in Portugal, and I've always found their proactive customer service is really second to none. They have an expert international team, and they'll help you find a perfect beach villa, apartment, countryside farm, or whatever you want. Pedro was actually a very early guest in episode 2 of Podcast Portugal, and I really recommend these guys. Click the link in the show notes to connect with Guthrie Rocha Properties. This is Justin West from Podcast Portugal. We have a really interesting episode today. I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to Guðmundur. The guys in Lisbon, they are setting up a beautiful looking new school called the Lisboan. What a great name. Guðmundur, a big welcome to you.
Hey, thank you, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here. And you're absolutely right. These buildings are amazing. They are stunningly beautiful. And it's just such a pleasure to have the opportunity to move to Lisbon. I moved here in March.
Okay.
So I'm new and I'm learning. This city is just amazing, and the area around the school in Alcântara is just incredible. Incredible history.
Yeah, and what's a little bit of the history of the school building itself? Do you know what it was previously?
Yeah, so the buildings were built between 1905 and 1910, and they were built to be a pasta factory. So they were the Anapolitana pasta factory. And for decades, that's people, mostly women, working in these buildings making pasta. And then about 4 years ago, we took over the buildings. I think the headquarters of Auchan were based in the buildings at the time we took over them, but they were in a pretty bad state. So we've spent 4 years painstakingly redeveloping these incredible buildings, and of course they're protected by law. So we've had to preserve all of the original features, both structurally, inside and out.
Well, I think you've done a really good job, and I think it's maybe often overlooked that in educational environments are so crucial to the learning experience. I know I went to quite a nice school in the UK. I don't know if you heard of Millfield.
I have heard of Millfield, yeah.
Yeah, and we had beautiful environment there. But what was really interesting, we had a really nice sculpture park, and I'm really into art. And my head of art at the time was constantly commissioning all these sculptors to come in and do a residency for every year, and they would leave a beautiful sculpture. Often some of the other students would be scratching their heads and thinking, what on earth are those things? But I really appreciated it. So you've... your personal journey. So, where have you come from, and what made you come to Lisbon and decide to build a school?
So I'm from Iceland. Sometimes I say originally, but I'm still from Iceland. I always will be from Iceland. And I grew up traveling the world with my parents. I grew up. Lived in Scotland, and for many years lived in Saudi Arabia. This is back in the 70s. So that tells you how old.
Me too.
Roughly.
Me too. I grew up in Saudi. I grew up in Dhahran. Yeah, I went to the American International School in Dhahran, and then I actually returned to Saudi because my parents were there for 35 years, and I returned to Saudi and I worked as a teacher and PE teacher at the British International School of Jeddah.
No way.
Yeah.
I went to that school when I was a kid.
No, you're a joke. Did you know my parents? No, maybe they were there a little bit after. Mr. and Mrs. West, Brian West and Judy West.
Oh, those names ring bells. That's just crazy, Justin.
His boss at the time, Dad was a PE teacher as well, so I was in the same department as my dad. His boss was Malcolm Smith. He was the predecessor. He'd been there for quite a while, I think.
That name also rings a bell.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a small world.
Okay. It is a small world. Yeah. So basically we moved there in 1976. And I stayed there until 1984. And so the first school I went to an Arabic school. for the first 3 years.
Wow.
And then went to the British school, which I think was called
Conti.
Jeddah Prep. No, that's right. The Conti school.
Conti.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I went to the Conti school. I think it was in its first year of opening.
Yeah.
And then I went to, I think, Jeddah Prep.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that was an incredible experience to live in Saudi Arabia. And then as an adult, so I moved back to Iceland eventually as a teenager, and then finished my sort of secondary education there. And then as all teenagers do, I'm umming and ahhing about what they're going to do with their lives. Go to university, what you're going to study. And so I chose archaeology. So I studied archaeology. I went to UCL in London, University College London, and I studied archaeological science. And then I got a job with the National Museum of Iceland, and I worked with their archaeology department, basically involved in research and surveys and excavations, traveling the island, mostly excavating Viking Age and medieval farmsteads and burials.
How exciting! I love that.
It was phenomenal. I mean, Iceland is so beautiful. I mean, it doesn't matter where you go; everywhere is just so stunningly beautiful. And I used to work in the summer times doing these surveys, and it would just be me and a rucksack and a GPS device, and I would literally go for days without seeing another human being.
Fantastic.
And it was just amazing. And it was whilst I was at the museum, there was an open day advertised because at the music conservatoire, basically the music school in Reykjavik, because I've always been singing. I've been surrounded by music growing up. And in Iceland, there is such a rich music tradition. They pretty much, if there's more than two people living somewhere, there's a choir. So I went for this open day, and I had a couple of singing lessons. And the teacher then at the time said, "Look, Guðmundur, you should seriously come and study full time, study to sing." So I did. So thankfully they had an evening school for sort of adults, and so I went there for 4 years, and I got my grade 8 of music. And then my teacher then said, "Guðmundur, it's time for you to go and audition for the schools of music in London." He said I should go and really take this seriously and become professional. So I had this choice before me of whether I should stay in archaeology or whether I should go and audition to become a singer, a musician in London. And I made the latter decision. And I went to London and I auditioned for the schools of music. And I got in. I got into the Royal Academy. I got into the Royal College. I went to the Royal Academy of Music. Left Iceland for 2 years and left my small little pond and jumped into a huge big ocean of music and art in London. Back to London, and it was just the most daunting and incredible experience. And so I did that, and I was singing, obviously, all the time, but at the same time, I was also keeping my archaeology alive because obviously I was involved in lots of projects with the National Museum. I was involved with projects at UCL, where I did my undergraduate degree, and it was through that connection that I think it was in the second summer that I got a job offer to go and to be part of a research project in Turkey, in central Turkey, a place called Çatalhöyük. It's just outside the city of Konya. And it's, for archaeologists, this is one of the sort of type sites, as they call them. It's one of these key sites around the world that is a very significant impact in terms of our culture, our global culture and heritage. Basically, it's one of the first permanent city sites on Earth.
Okay.
And it dates back to about 7,500 BC. So
wow, based on, I'm guessing, the agricultural developments in those days.
Yeah. So basically, it kind of sits at that transition of where we were transitioning from being hunter-gatherers and mobile to becoming permanent agricultural communities.
Mm.
Where we would settle permanently.
Is that quite near? I've heard of Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah, so Göbekli Tepe is even older than this place. Göbekli Tepe is in the far east of Turkey.
Okay.
And I haven't been there, but that is a site that has been changing our perceptions and definitions of an understanding of human culture. An incredible place. But this is in central Turkey, so it's considered, Turkey is such a huge country, so it's a bit of a distance from Göbekli Tepe.
And what's your
so I work.
Sorry to interrupt. What's
No,
your opinion of the English journalist who's often sort of quoted to sort of saying that history goes much further back and civilization goes much further back than the current evidence suggests? What's your feelings of his?
Well, I think there is a lot there, that I think is absolutely valid in terms of, I mean, and I think that's true for any field of knowledge. You think about it, our scientific inquiry. Science is a relatively young, endeavor. I mean, it only has a history of about 300, 350, maybe 400 years. So I think there is so much that we don't know. I think we're only really starting to scratch the surface. I sometimes use the analogy, if you're approaching a planet, and you're sort of coming down through the atmosphere and you're coming down through the clouds, and you're starting to see sort of land masses and coastlines take shape. I think in some ways I think that's where we are. So there is so much that we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
But in terms of his particular theories, I think I have problems with them, certainly, because I think to a significant extent he isn't basing his ideas in the evidence and letting the evidence actually take him to where it should logically go in terms of the truth. I think he has quite a preconceived set of notions in terms of what he's wanting to find in the evidence. So yes, I think valid to a point, but problematic to a significant degree.
Well, I guess it's interesting that he's getting people interested in and excited about something, and perhaps somebody who would have never gone into archaeology in the first place may pick up one of his books, agree or disagree, but maybe be interested and inspired and look further into it.
That is true. I think that certainly is true. It's raising a lot of interest, and he's out there with his own series on Netflix, etc. So it's generating a lot of interest.
Yeah.
But it's, as you can imagine, it's also getting quite a few academics pretty upset.
I'm sure. But I mean, like, what I really like about what we've just been talking about is that you seem to have a really nice. You seem to be very multi-skilled. You have lots of interests. You have lots of passions, and I align with that very much. I almost feel like I need multiple lives because I have so many interests. I have the art. I have the surf coaching. I have this podcast. I have the farming here in Alcântara, and I have jiu-jitsu, and I have all of these things which I just need multiple lives. I feel like at 52, I'm running out of time, and I have so many interests. I'm even trying to write a novel as well, and it's just getting completely crazy. So how do these multi-skills and multiple passions and interests, how does that shape your educational philosophy?
Yeah, that's well. Firstly, I think it's amazing to hear all these different things that you're doing, Justin. That sounds really incredible. I'd love to learn more at some point. At my age of 54.
Well, you look very good for it. You don't have the camera on, man. You look much better than I do.
Thank you. That is a great question. I think inevitably, and all of these experiences have been so formative, and they shape very much who I am as a teacher and as an educator. And I think really I've been an educator, either educating myself or helping educate other people all my life. So sort of that quest for trying to understand the world around you, and then extending that understanding to sort of further and further from where you are as an individual. I guess in some ways that's what we do as we grow and develop from being children to adults, etc. And so I think also a very significant part of my experience and outlook as an educator, I would characterize myself very much as a values-based educator. And what do I mean by that? I mean that I firmly believe that education can be a really powerful force for change, that it can have really positive impact on people's lives, that it can be a force for good. And unfortunately, I think so many people in different parts of the world, whether it's either not having access to education, which is a tragedy, or not having access to good education, or not having, or living in an environment where there are so many challenges, where there is poverty, where there is unemployment, and the endless problems to deal with, unfortunately. If I could wave a magic wand, I'd want to be able to create great, wonderful, exciting environments for children and young people to flourish within. And I guess that's what I've always been trying to do in the schools that I've worked at. I started my working life back in Serbia, so this was it sort of obviously ties into my role as an archaeologist. But I'll come on to that in a moment. But I think a very formative aspect of my upbringing is my parents, obviously. My mother is deaf, and she became deaf at the age of 2. And she's the most incredible human being, as I think most, if not all, mothers are. And she taught me so much. But one of the things I found very difficult to see growing up was the amount of prejudice, um, um, and just ignorance around her being deaf. She was. Some people would often assume that she was somehow stupid or ignorant or somehow inferior due to the fact that she didn't have one of her senses. So it really shaped my upbringing. I guess developing this sense of what's right, the sort of moral cause of justice. And I think that's really shaped who I am as an educator in wanting to make positive change and positive impact.
That's very interesting. And every generation, we always worry about the younger generation, and these days we're constantly thinking about how devices and the internet and AI and for my own son, my son Martim is 5, and I'm constantly thinking at the moment, how do I prepare him for the modern world, and how do I prepare him for an environment and a society which AI is going to play such an important role and probably take a lot of job roles, and how do we sort of look into the future and sort of make those decisions on how we take the kids, our responsibility now, and how do we shape them, or maybe shaping them is not the right word. Maybe create learners that can adapt to a world that is just so beyond us, really.
Yeah, well, if I could tell the future, Justin, I would be a rich man. But no, you're right. I mean, I think there is always a tendency for the older generation to look at the younger generations and to sort of, in some ways, glorify or sort of think of their own childhood as a golden age of how things used to be and how great they were and how terrible things are for the young ones. And I think that's natural, and it's clear as a parent. I mean, I have 2 children, um, and I can see some of the challenges that they experience, and of course, we also experience them as adults. And I think for me, it always has to come back to just beautiful fundamentals. Education for me works beautifully when you enjoy being with the people that you're learning from or learning with. So it's all about relationships in my mind. That's one of the beautiful fundamentals. But of course, complicated and sometimes challenging to get that right. Because if you think about a school environment, for example, with potentially hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people in the same community, there are so many different relationships being formed all the time. And those relationships are changing and developing all the time, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. So for me, the responsibility of creating a school and being part of a school is amazing. Um, but for me, as a school leader, it's about making sure that you're generating the circumstances whereby we can build relationships that are based on trust, that are based on integrity, that are based on honesty, that are based on openness. And I think school environments often, just by their very nature, they almost contradict all of these different elements of what I feel to be required in a strong educational environment. Because you'll come in and there's this sort of power dynamic of the teachers versus the students, and there's lots of rules and regulations and bells ringing and the rest of it, and you've got to go be here at this time, and it can be really confusing and overwhelming for young people, and also for adults sometimes. So this is, I think, where the challenge lies really in creating that sort of that bedrock, that sometimes like we characterize it as a garden. It sounds like a cliche, but I think it is. This is what we want to create. We want to create a garden. Generally, human beings like being in gardens and surrounded by nature. So I guess for me, that's really the heart of what a good education is about. And then, of course, you've got other elements which are really important. But coming back to your question, Justin, in terms of the challenges, absolutely, there are huge challenges out there for young people. The information they're being bombarded with on a daily basis. How do you make sense of all this information? And then, of course, we've got the political landscape where increasingly politicians seem to think that it's okay to just openly lie and misrepresent the truth. And what is that teaching our young people? They're seeing these leadership figures, and of course they will emulate and they will pick up and copy to some degree what they see in the media. And increasingly in the media, it's becoming more and more difficult to know actually what's been generated by a machine, what's fake imagery or fake video, and what's actually genuine. So this is part of the challenge. So I think increasingly, and I certainly hope so, that increasingly over time, over the next decade, is that what we start to actually see and value more and more in education is what makes us uniquely human. So that as the machines are taking over the jobs that we can then don't have to do, that we can focus more and more on what it means to be human. The
Beautiful.
spirituality, our emotions, our culture, our art, etc.
Yeah.
That is my hope. But of course, other challenges like the climate emergency that we're living through, which I don't think we're taking seriously enough as a global community at all. We seem to be sleepwalking our way into this unfolding disaster. So huge challenges, but with challenge comes opportunity.
And I don't know whether it was the stress of dealing with a school where the teachers were constantly putting out fires and behavioral issues, and we just felt that my team was doing very well at school. He does amazingly well at jiu-jitsu. So we've tried to build his educational program around other things rather than school. So we tried to homeschool him here as much as possible on the farm with growing stuff, and practical things. And then he does his jiu-jitsu where he gets a little bit more formality and a little bit more discipline and sort of child play and rolling around. He does horse riding, which gives him the responsibility of looking after. So we've really had to consider, and I think probably that is a big responsibility for parents to not just hand your kids over to and just trust. Really, you have to look into it, and I think, I mean, it comes back to a point that I found when I was teaching, that the philosophy in the British International School was very much of inclusion. Now, of course, inclusion I think is very important. You're going to have mixed abilities in the classroom. But I felt that with a classroom size of, say, 20, 22, you'd perhaps have sort of 5 very, I'm not going to say gifted, but more able to, and they were sort of left to their own devices, thinking, the more able kids, they're going to be able to be successful anyway. And so a vast proportion of the teacher's time was managing the misbehavior in the classroom. And I felt in some ways as a teacher, I wouldn't say that I was elitist at all, because it was also nice to see some of those more able kids helping the sort of median kids. But I felt that the teachers were so exhausted with classroom management that they didn't have time to really, not to push, but to inspire more and give more to the more able kids. There seemed to be a little bit more of an attention towards to just management and rather than too much education. And how does a school deal with that kind of, to try and include everybody in a society, in a classroom community, but also to give the kids with absolute talents more inspiration and also to help sweep along everybody else in the classroom environment?
Yeah, it's a hugely important question. Yeah, and I've seen that kind of environment, often, Justin, in my time as an educator, and having visited lots of schools. And it's always I think really for me, it's schools are such fascinating places because you've got so many different people living and working together in that environment, and everybody brings their own perspectives and their experiences and their emotions, and it all comes together in this incredible environment, which is a school, and so you have a culture, you have a school culture, and culture is created. We create culture, so. And I guess this is also, kind of where it sort of links into my interest in, as my background as an archaeologist, is that, you're trying to understand culture, what makes people tick, why do we make the decisions we make? So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it comes back to the school culture that we together are responsible for generating and then managing. So I've seen school environments where behavior is a real challenge. And I've also seen schools be able to turn that around through very intentional strategies. There have to be very clear structures in a school because you've got so many different people working together. One, they've got to be healthy and safe, living and working, learning together. So you have to have very clear guidelines and structures and rules in a school community. Because if you don't, there's the risk that people just don't understand, and they don't understand the expectations that are made of them within that community. So that is a logistical, practical requirement, and it plays a central role in shaping the school culture. So, in shaping that school culture, you have to know where the boundaries lie, and if you step over those boundaries, what does that therefore mean? What are the consequences? What are the consequences? Are there consequences? What are those consequences? And are they based on just punishing people and therefore being quite negative? Or are they restorative in nature? So fundamentally, we want you to be a better person as a result of having made a poor choice, etc. So all of that feeds into how you generate a school culture. And I think the danger is often, I've seen so many examples of this, is yeah, we're all so different. We all have our different abilities and skill sets. I firmly believe, Justin, that inside every single one of us is a genius waiting to be born. I really do. It sounds like a cliche. I really do believe that.
It was actually one of the founding principles of Millfield School was that every child has potential, and it's the school's responsibility to provide the opportunity for them to fulfill it. So their philosophy was that they would try to provide every type of sport under the sun. They had a polo team. They had absolutely everything because they realized that giving the kids more choice to find that one thing that they really find passionate about and really become interested in, they would help them fly,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, absolutely. Having a lot of choice is important in a school, and having a voice as well. How, feeling that you have the ability to have a say in to a certain degree of the environment and how it operates and works in a school, I think is really important, and that you're given some responsibility. I've seen far too often, particularly, you were talking about the very able children in a school. The danger is, I think, sometimes in schools is that because they may be ignored to a certain degree or not challenged sufficiently in terms of, really engaging with them so that they feel that they're also really excited about their learning, is that can be quite lazy in their approach to learning. Because they have that ability, they can many times take their foot off the pedal and actually develop habits of mind and approaches to learning that actually can serve them in negative ways later in their studies and later in life. Because, you see people develop their abilities in different areas, whether it's in music or whether it's in sport or as a scientist, whatever it may be. 99% of it is hard work. It's a hard slog. And maybe 1 or 2% is talent. And I've seen so many people succeed through hard work with limited talent. And I've seen people with lots of talent not succeed because they haven't worked hard enough, or they haven't had the skill sets developed within them of being hard working. So for me, it always comes back to culture, and we have this amazing opportunity here in creating a new school. It exists on paper, but we are now, well, it exists on paper and obviously in the buildings that we are just about ready. But we invite the children in first day of school, 1st of September.
Wow. And so you're still having parents now signing up, and it's still open doors, and yeah, fantastic. And they can come and look around the school yet, or like an open day, or because what we'll do, we can put that in the show notes. And
if you go to the school website, the Lisbon,
it's a beautiful website, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, the team here have done a great job in putting it together. We have a lot of creative talent here in our team. There's I think on the homepage, there's a book a tour. Go to that and it'll give you the schedule of tours. I think we have 2 tours most weeks, either at 12 o'clock at lunchtime or at 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And me or one of my team members will take you around and show you these beautiful buildings.
Wow. So I wanted to actually ask you a little bit, because we've covered the topic on new technology and, obviously all the AI and Chat GPT or GTP or whichever way around it is. But what is your goals? How are you going to integrate new technology into the school curriculum?
I think we've reached a stage almost whereby, because technology is just everywhere, that it's become such an integral part of our lives, our daily lives. And I was just thinking back to the Monday where we had the power outage across Portugal and Spain, revealing actually how helpless we become in light of not having access to that technology. Seeing people sort of out on the street looking at their phones in disbelief almost. What? It doesn't work. There's no reception. Was a stark reminder of actually how vulnerable we can be. And I think the danger is that with all these amazing, exciting technologies, is that I think quite a few of us have developed in such a way that they have become almost a crutch. When we are without them, we can't walk properly. We can't do things properly. So, as with anything else, whether it's technology or the study of history or whichever area of learning we're engaging with, it has to be about exploring all of the different benefits.
Ditch the plastic and the toxins. Mother's Earth dishwasher papers are made from non-toxic, eco-certified materials, so they're safer for your home, your health, your family, and the planet. No bulky plastic bottles, no waste, just clean dishes, shipped anywhere in Europe, and 3 times cheaper than those toxic tabs you buy in the supermarkets. Click the link in the show notes to start saving. Guðmundur, yes, we were talking about technologies. We had a little break there, and just to remind the listeners, we were talking about how new technology is going to play a part in the Lisboan school.
Yes, so yeah, I mean the technology has positives and negatives, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we're educating around both. So. For example, if you think about artificial intelligence, which is an incredible tool, it also has a variety of negative impacts. We've got to make sure that we are educating for the responsible use of artificial intelligence, as with any other technology. What does it mean when you ask a question on ChatGPT? You create a prompt, and the environmental impacts are significant in terms of energy usage. It is incredible to see the statistics around how different countries, in particular in the European Union and the US, governments developing infrastructure, increasing quite considerably the ability to be able to create electricity. And of course, that has environmental impacts. So all of that is part and parcel of what we need to do within the Lisbon in terms of educating around technology. We will have a variety of science labs. One of the buildings actually is called the silo. It's where they used to store the flour for the pasta factory, with these incredibly thick walls.
Nice.
They're about 1.5 meters thick. Because apparently when you store flour, it can become an explosive under the right circumstances or the wrong circumstances. But thankfully, now, basically we have science laboratories in the silo. I also want to install a dark room for analog photography because I think it's such a beautiful art and brings together lots of different skill sets. And we'll have a makerspace for sort of robotics and 3D printing. So technology will be everywhere. Well, not everywhere. It'll be throughout the school. But we also have something called the Learning Wall, which is basically inside of every classroom. One of the walls has a screen on it. We have the ability to cover that screen up with these two beautiful big whiteboards. So we can be very intentional about how we utilize screens, for example, in our school. We've made the decision, and somewhat controversially, you could argue, to be what we call a no-phone school. So we will, you can bring your phone to school in the morning, and then you put it inside this sort of, you could store it away, and then retrieve it at the end of the day. But for us, it's not about banning technology at all. It is about educating for responsible use. We will utilize a range of other devices in the school. We will have laptops. We will have iPads, for example. So we will have the ability to be able to tap into these technologies as we need to. So that's just one important slice of education in the school.
I think the evidence seems to suggest that that the kids actually, when the phones are put away, I've seen lots of reports, perhaps anecdotal, but the kids are relieved. They're actually like, "Oh, we've been released from that for a whole day."
I mean, yes. I mean, I think there are arguments for and against, and I think as with anything, it's how you actually put it into practice, and
it's
then how that culture
right?
develops. Yeah, exactly. And
You're
how
giving
that
the
culture
kids
develops within the school.
You're giving the kids the balance to. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. These technological devices are highly profitable, and they're highly funded to attract our attention, and kids and youth tend to be susceptible to that just as much as adults, I'd imagine, probably even more so. So we're fighting against as educationalists, you're fighting against quite a strong incentive to attract these kids' attention, and I think the idea to give them a little bit of relief from that, I think, is a really nice, positive idea. And it's not about banning phones, like you say. It's giving the kids the opportunity to do different things. And I think my response also to technology is that it actually takes quite a lot of education. It takes a smart person to create prompts on ChatGPT to get good answers. And I think there is always AI. I don't believe is going to do everything for us. I think we need to learn how to create prompts on a practical level, but also how to implement it in our lives and to create a balance. It's very fascinating.
Yes, for sure. It is fascinating. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I also, this is a completely not relevant to technology question. I really, one of the reasons why we set up Podcast Portugal was for intercultural exchange. And, I'm an immigrant here, or an expat, or however you want to call it. And Rita is my partner. She's Portuguese. So we are really kind of, we often discuss about Portugal and Portuguese heritage and Portuguese culture. You and I both lived in some very strong cultures in the Middle East and the Far East, in your case. And I think, we have a lot of people here moving to Portugal, moving to Lisbon, and bringing a lot of things. And it's how Portugal can express their culture in a positive way, and how the incomers, or however you would like to call them, also have a nice learning of that culture, and create an understanding and an appreciation and a respect, so that we're not coming into a country and completely just bringing outside values, adding to the existing culture, but not dominating the existing culture, is, I think, probably the best way to put it. So what I'd like to ask you is why Lisbon?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, and also what you were outlining there, Justin, is for me a huge important issue, because for such a variety of so many different reasons. Because, as you say, people coming into a country like Portugal, the impacts can be positive, they can be negative. And I can see some of the challenges around the very significant levels of immigration that have occurred in Portugal and in Lisbon and other cities across Portugal over recent years. And it's really interesting to see as well how the government and the authorities is trying to manage some of these challenges. But of course, a very considerable part of that responsibility lies with the people like us who are coming into this beautiful country and this rich culture. So for us, the way I see it, I feel it's important that we develop what I call a community school. We're coming into these amazing buildings at this incredible location with this history, a very important and significant part of Alcântara's history, that we come in and that we attempt to create a community school. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we go out into our community regularly because there is so much on our doorstep here in Alcântara, whether it's sports opportunities on the river, cultural opportunities through museums. We have the incredible Monsanto forest on our doorstep. We have Agronomia, the agricultural college with its incredible history. We want to have an allotment out there and grow our own plants and vegetables. There is so much. And on the flip side of that, having the community in Alcântara develop a sense of seeing our school as something important in the community, that they have the ability to come into our school, to have educational opportunities, to learn languages, for example, be able to use our facilities, and not done in such a way that it's profit driven. If you can afford to use our facilities or can afford to pay for some of the offerings that we offer the community, great. If you can't, then we'll offer it for free. So I think that's really important. Whilst we use English as the medium of instruction across the school, we actually will require all of our students to learn either first language Portuguese or Portuguese as an additional language. That's crucially important to us as a school in respecting the local area and the local culture of Lisbon and Portugal. We want to build links with, for example, the Junta de Freguesia, to understand what they're doing. How can we support the community through their initiatives so that we can work together? So that's hugely important to us.
Interesting. No, that's really nice to hear. My team speaks at 5 is fluent English and Portuguese, and he flips between the two depending who he's speaking with, because my Portuguese is probably the same level as his.
Yeah,
and I think language is fascinating, and I think it gives us a real good perspective into culture, because I don't think you can really fully understand a culture until you can speak the language and feel and the rich tapestry of the language and the way people speak and describe things. And
absolutely.
I mean, you can understand.
As I'm learning now here, when I'm meeting people, it's very common that people just come up to you and hug you and give you a kiss on one or two cheeks.
For an Icelandic person, that might be quite unusual, right?
Well, maybe it is. But in some cultures, that's the expected thing to do. And I mean, I have a home in Serbia, in Belgrade. My wife is from Serbia, Katarina. It's very common for you to you kiss 3 times on the cheek.
Yeah.
In other contexts, that might be completely, no, you can't hug your colleague. You can't kiss them on the cheek.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And where we grew up in Saudi, you kiss the men on both cheeks, and then you certainly don't even look at the women.
Yeah. Or in the United Arab Emirates, where, young people or you meet another man or a boy, and they will pull you in, and then you would rub noses.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Like Maori, it's like the Maori culture as well, so similar to that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, I'm really excited for the Lisbon. I think it's such a beautiful looking school, great facilities, and I think if we were living in Lisbon, I'd definitely be signing my team up for your school. Well, he's a little bit young now, but who knows? Maybe in the future we might move back to the city.
Well, it's very, very kind of you to say so, Justin. It's been a pleasure to speak to you today.
Yeah.
And you're always welcome to come and see the school. I hope we And so an official invitation, I'm extending it to you now.
Thank you.
And I'll take you around and show you the school.
I'd love to. No, thank you. That's very kind of you. And I wish you all the luck and all your students. I'm very excited for them. Thank you so much for your time, Guðmundur.
Obrigado, Justin.
Thank you. Muito obrigado. This is Justin West from Podcast Portugal, signing out. I just need some time, some focusing. I got the pen, I got the sheet, I got my... This episode of Podcast Portugal is brought to you by Flow Sports. If you're into jiu-jitsu, wrestling, rugby, cycling, basketball, and many more sports, Flow Sports have you covered. Stream live events, watch exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and dive into a world of top-tier sports coverage, all on one app. Don't miss a moment. Tap the link in the show notes to start watching with Flow Sports today. Simple, secure currency transfers from once-in-a-lifetime property purchase of your dreams to everyday expenses. Currencies Direct helps you save time and money on international transfers. Rated excellent on Trustpilot with over 17,000 positive reviews. Spend like a local with their multi-currency MasterCard. Tap the link in the show notes to get started.